Hello, hello. Welcome in, everybody. Let's see how everything is going over here. Ooh, excuse me. All right. There we go. That should do that. And if we go here. There we go. Chat is working. So, let us begin. It's been a while. It has been a while. Let's go ahead and do that, and cha-cha-cha. Hello, hello. Welcome, everybody. Let me go ahead and grab an Orb of Oculus. That way we can go ahead and start the stream. Cha-cha-cha. Don't look at my bank pen, please. Okay. We can dump all of this stuff. I was just doing some thermy, grinding up those Slayer points for when Araxor comes out. And we need that and that. Now, where is this set? We are going to Ardoin. Let's find a nice spot to look at things. Nice little background for us. I think this was good. Scry with the Oculus Orb. And we got to turn off key remapping because that messes things up. Okay. And then ping, turn that off. And we'll just gotta deal with that until we... Is this the one I want? Oh, hello, King Frog Billy. We are just setting up the stream at the moment. We want the window capture. And then we go to this and it. Oh, well. Well, that's cool, thank you. We are going to go ahead and get started with Chapter 13 of The Gift of Guthix by Erin M. Evans. When we last left off, Gunnar and Ilme had a confrontation. There was a demon summoned into the chamber where the guardian of Guthix was. Gunnar and Ilme blamed each other, but no one really knows yet who summoned the demon. The guardian was dead, and Gunnar became the new Jarl. Gunnar cut off the Asgarnians from the rune essence mine, and now the Asgarnians are kind of in a tough situation because they have all of these different groups who are pledging fealty to King Radallan, but he doesn't have the resources that he promised them. He doesn't have the runes he doesn't have the rune supply to satisfy all of the contracts, basically, that he's set up. So the Asgarnian kingdom is looking weak, and the Fremenniks are looking strong, because Gunnar is reuniting the clans under his banner, and he's sworn to, 1, go to war with Asgarnia, and 2, destroy the rune altars, so runes cannot be made in the future. So, let's go ahead and begin. Chapter 13. The 55th year of the reign of King Radallan of Asgarnia. The 20th day of the month of September. Ardoin, Kandarin. Ardoin made Ilme appreciate the artistry of Falador. Old bones of the former city shattered by war and rebellion held up the newer sections, all wooden and gleaming. The scent of pine baking in the summer air hung thick around her as she dismounted in the stable yard. Between the old stone was so much wood palisades, wooden walls, even logs corrugating the mud into wooden roads through the gates. What are they doing with all those runes we sent them? Osiris asked, staring up at the timber-framed manor that seemed to be Ardoin's palace. A star of Saradomin hung bright in the burning gold where the lower sun struck it high on the wall. I thought they were meant for rebuilding. Why would you not rebuild with stone? They had their hands full battling the Majorat, superior of the White Knights said. His dark skin glistened with sweat, but still he wore his full riding armor. It would have taken all those runes to destroy him. Which, we do not need Eritona to remind us, was not in the treaty, Xanamoran pointed out, moving her to help elderly Master Stichalis down from his horse. Not explicitly, Superior admitted. Ardoin and its larger kingdom, Kandarin, had been ruled for many years by Haziel, a Majorat, one of the immortal lieutenants of Zamorak. Not a god. Oh, don't worry about it. If you have to leave, that's great. But thanks for stopping by. One of the immortal lieutenants of Zamorak. Not a god, but far more powerful than a mere human. Rebels had sought aid from Asgarnia and the Wizard's Tower, and now Saradominus government had begun rebuilding the walled city on the edge of the elven wilderness. Asgarnia had not explicitly overthrown the neighboring kingdom, Ilme knew. What the Wizards of Kandarin did with the runes was their own business, but there was no ignoring their timing, or the star of Saradomin shining over the town. Surely, Pirier went on, you don't think it would be better for the Majorat to still rule? He was a tyrant, a violent creature. And how fortunate your siblings in faith have taken over, Xanamoran said darkly. One wonders what they would do with other Zamorakians. Master Stichalis huffed as he beat the dust from his red robes. Nonsense. To each to the extent of their own abilities, for the price of their own sacrifices, he quoted. You and I are not Haziel. We could not be his zeal if in 1,000 lifetimes. Why should we worry about suffering for his crimes or his weakness? He took his walking stick down from the saddle and patted the horse's neck with one gnarled hand. Zamorak approves of their ambition, their survival, I'm very sure. Bored, Rue complained, curling in the sling Ilme had made for him. She scratched his jaw. Tired. Master Stakalis peered at the little dragon from beneath the prodigious eyebrows. You're a grumpy baby today, Rue huffed. Not baby. Calm down, Ilme said affectionately. She reached the yard busy with white knights and grooms. They were losing light, and she wanted to get moving. A man strode towards them from the manor, trailed by a wizard in blue and white robes. He was middle-aged, plain, and serious-looking, with a close-trimmed beard of reddish-brown over pale skin. She was darker complexioned, black hair bound up in a top-knot that displayed her long neck and tasseled earrings. Welcome to Ardoin, the man said. I'm Niven Carnelian. This is Master Jana. Come this way. We'll show you to your rooms before dinner. He turned to walk away, and Ilme interrupted. I would like to see the excavations first. Niven Carnelian looked back over his shoulder, frowning. Tomorrow. Today, she said, if you please. Ilme, Azira said under her breath. Niven Carnelian had been among the handful who had led the rebellion against Haziel. Ilme knew that much. He was used to holding his ground against stubborn forces. But, he suspected, he knew where to retreat, when to yield. You did not overthrow a near-god tyrant in one swift move. I am here for one purpose, my lord, she said. Your letter said that you were close to discovering the site of the Death Altar, and I want to see what exactly it is that you found. The altar is critical to the defense of Asgarnia, and by extension the defense of Kandarin, and all the agreements between our two countries. The sun is up, I am well. Either find me someone who can take me to the excavation, or I will find it myself. She turned to Master Jana. Is it you? Jana paused. I'm involved in the search for the lost temple, yes. Perfect, Ilme said. Then I'll go with you. Jana looked askance at Carnelian, who sighed and opted to yield. Fine. Dinner will be served at sunset, he gestured at the others. Which of you would rather refresh yourselves than dig in the dirt? Rue growled and hooked his little claws over the edge of the sling. Tired! A silent conference passed between Xanamron and Aziris, and Ilme was on the verge of declaring she would go alone, thank you very much, when Master Stakalis hobbled forward. Give me the baby, Ilme. You, Xanamron, and Aziris go see the rune altar. Rue curled tight against Ilme, and reflexively she cradled him. Not baby. Not baby. Then, tired. I don't know if you ought to be alone, Master, Xanamron began. Stakalis waved him off. I'm hardly alone with Perrier and 50 white knights roaming the manor. Besides, I am laden with runes. Go search for the site. Rue, come on. Ilme scooped Rue from the sling and held him out to the older man. Rue climbed onto Master Stakalis' shoulders, stretching around the back of his neck like a scarf. Protect, he growled. Yes, yes, Stakalis said fondly. You're a very fierce little baby. Jana led them from the manor to the western side of the city. It's a bit of a walk, she apologized, but I assume you'd rather walk than ride after your travels. Then she added, Lord Carnelian's letters wouldn't have mentioned it, but we've actually broken through into a void, a room beyond. They were spending today shoring up the dig site, but we might have found the temple itself. Hope flared in Ilme. The Death Altar. The Death Altar was one of the few they had not been able to find, its runes described as powerful components in combat spells. A memory rose up, unbidden, herself so much younger, sitting under a tree with a map spread out, her finger circling the kingdom that was to becoming Kandarin. Here, that's supposed to be an altar that makes death runes. You wouldn't use those, would you? Gunnar asked, sounding worried. What do they do? Wake the dead and things? She hesitated. Yes, 100 times yes. It's not exactly like that, she said. It amplifies things. Ilme huffed out a breath to exercise the memory. Can you see the altar? She asked. Where you've broken through? Jana shook her head. Our records suggest the temple is very large. I know, Ilme interrupted. I was hoping the orientation would, well, progress its own progress is its own blessing. A very Guthixian proverb, Jana said, with a smile. She cast a quick look at Xanamoron. Were you troubled on your travels? I don't know how far north your path brought you, but we hear about the Fremennik raids. It's what Lord Carnelian wants to discuss most. Ilme flushed hot. The Fremennik have always raided the coasts, she said, menacingly, repeating Master Endel's words. They've had bad storms the last year or so. They're just chasing resources. Perhaps, Gianna said doubtfully. Hello, King Frog Billy. Welcome back. Perhaps, Gianna said doubtfully. Rumor has it they have a grudge, and a great Jarl this time. Then she added, they were the ones giving you access to the rune essence mine, weren't they? An entire decade had passed, and still the panic of that moment, of Zoria dying, of Gunnar turning on her, for the demon ready to kill her and Zoria both, would sometimes crash over her. Fresh as the day, she felt as if ice were spreading out from her core, and she drew in a deep breath, trying to press it all back in. Thank you for the sub, King Billy. This was why they needed the Death Altar. This was why she could not wait. At first, she had tried to fix what was broken between her and Gunnar. She had sent letters asking for hospitality in the ritual ways, and even fought to go along with the knights when the knights would try to secure the mine. She had told Irithona everything she knew about Gunnar, about the Fremennik, and nothing worked. Eventually, she had to forget him. Stop chasing stories of the Wolf Clan's exploits. That was King Radallan's and his advisors' jobs. She was meant to do research, to spy, to go where she was told. And then the raids began. Master Endel wasn't wrong. The Fremennik raided the coasts and isles when resources grew thin or Jarls became agitated. But for the last few years it had been sustained and uncompromising. Villages wiped away, outposts bristling with longships replacing fishing camps. Radallan sent knights to support the battered settlements, but more often than not they arrived too late, chasing the Fremennik down the shore. Their outposts would vanish onto their longships before any army could reach them, only to reappear in a different spot. Eventually, Valzen had said before Ilme and her party had left, we will need to accept that Master Endel's plan of let them tire themselves out is ineffective. They're bound by the Northern Sea, Perrier pointed out. They're mostly attacking their own. He might still be right. I think Kandarin would have opinions about your use of mostly, Velson returned. And whatever we've done for them thus far, they know we want their rune altar. Jana questions still hung over them. The suffering and damages to Kandarin's northern settlements Heavy in her words, Ilme cleared her throat. We are handling the situation. Gianna's gaze flickered over her. Lord Carnelian will be very glad to hear exactly how this is being accomplished. They would round their way through the city onto the western gate beyond the grounds that had been cleared right down to the river. That wound down from the forest, the thick trees that had given Ardoyne its shining wooden repairs, watching warily from a distance. Several cart lengths from the gates, a pit the size of a small house disturbed the ground, rigged by rattle fence on 3 sides. Dirt had been piled in hills to either side. Ilme glanced at the gate, trying to match the maps she'd found on the location of the city. The Death Altar had been lost, even before the other altars had fallen into disrepair. A holy relic of an ancient elven site. The maps all placed it outside Ardoyne, but within the city, with the city rebuilt after the destruction wrought by the Majorat and his forces, it was harder to say if they were far enough outside or too close. Gianna climbed down the ladder first. Ilme moved to follow. Wait, Xanamoran said in a low voice. Azira stood beside him, arms folded, the two of them a united front. What's your plan here? Ilme frowned. Go down and see if they found anything. If they haven't, we need to find the other sites. You are not digging in the dirt, Azira declared. Why not? We need that altar. Because you do not know the first thing about it, and you're likely to bury yourself under a ton of stone. You know they don't have the altar, Xanamoran said. What are you going to do when you see that for yourself? Ilme looked from one to the other. Climb back up and go have dinner. Aziris and Xanamoran exchanged a look. Do you promise? Aziris asked. Of course What's this about? Ilme demanded. You're acting like I'm being unreasonable. Not unreasonable, Xanamoran said. Obsessed, Aziris said. The word obsessed. We should have been here in another 2 days, but you wouldn't stop. We made good time, Ilme protested. Is that a bad thing? Look, Xanamoran said. You obviously still feel a lot of responsibility. Not that you should, Aziris chimed in, for the business with the Fremennik. And you're right, the Death Altar would be very valuable, but not so necessary you need to destroy yourself finding it. We don't have enough rune essence stored to waste time with weaker spells, Ilme said sharply. Do you actually think the Fremennik are going to march all the way to Falador and attack us, Aziris said? They've only managed to be a nuisance, and it's taken them 10 years to do that. We need the mine back, Ilme said, moving towards the ladder. And Gunnar isn't just going to hand it over to us. If it's not here, I'll make a note, and we'll go back. She climbed down before either of them could argue. Gianna was waiting with a pair of lit lamps at the bottom. Tunnels radiated off the sides of the pit on 3 walls, and Gianna indicated the one headed south. After you? Darkness folded around her. The lamp too dim to press more than a foot or so from her. The walls of the tunnel squeezed so close in places the earth crumbled from them as they passed, scraped free by their shoulders. Ilme felt as if she were slowly exploding over and over. He promised to destroy us. He promised vengeance. He is coming, and I have to be ready. But here everything narrowed down to a point. There was only moving forward, only looking ahead that 1 or 2 feet, hoping what was at the end was worth it. Down and down they went, down more ladders, winding their way into the earth. Exploratory tunnels bent off the main one, and Ilme could only follow Gianna as she took each turning, roughly west. Ilme thought if she had still had her bearings, the passage widened slightly as one wall gave way to rough-hewn stone, still dusty with the yellowish dirt of the tunnels behind. In the middle of the walls, a dark hole gaped like a hungry mouth. Here we are, Gianna said. She held up her lamp to the hole, and the mouth widened into a gullet that stretched on beyond the lamp's dim light. Ilme put her own lamp through the hole, followed by one shoulder and then her head. With the lamp held as far as she could reach, she could see the dark shadows intercepting passages. She rose up on her tiptoes. "No," Azira said, and her arm went around Ilme's ribs, pulling her back through the rough-edged hole. "I wouldn't advise that," Jana said. "The excavation team tells me they're planning to map out the location from the surface and try digging ventilation shafts in the next few days. Right now, we don't know if the air is good. Right now, you don't know if it's full of giant spiders and shadow beasts," Xanamoran said. "You didn't see the altar in there, right?" "No," Ilme said, still considering the hole. "Then we go." "Just a moment," she handed Xanamoran her lamp, pulled out her notebook from her satchel, and flipped through it to where she copied maps of the Lost Temple. She studied the paths that bend in around the many columns. She peered back into the hole, and felt disappointment flood her. "This isn't it," she said. She poked at her stonework very roughly, not remotely elven. She reached around trying to dislodge a piece to get a better look. "Stop," Jana said. "You might bring down the wall." The stone broke in half, and the wall didn't come down. Ilme turned it in her hand, studying the chisel marks. Worked, but not well. Seated very tightly. "Ilme," Azira said in warning tones. "Just a moment," Ilme said. She sat down on the dirt floor, opening her notebook to sketch out the shape. What else would be in here, if not the temple? Something that connected to the temple. Something that had later scholars might have mistaken for the temple. "It's getting late," Jana said. "Perhaps we should return for dinner." Ilme didn't even answer this time. She flipped backwards through her notes. Secret tunnels the Majorat had built, the ancient ruins of what had come before Ardorn, a sunken elven city. "Ilme, you can do this back at the palace," Aziris began. "No, I can't," Ilme said. If she could place these tunnels, she could decide whether they needed to mount their own expedition. Because if they didn't have the Death Altar, they wouldn't have the spells necessary to defeat Gunnar's army when he came. "You have to fix this," she told herself. Aziris and Xanamoran muttered over her, How do you want to, and you go, and save some for me, and you'd best find me later." She heard them kiss, heard Aziris talking to Jana as she led the other wizard away. Xanamoran crouched down beside Ilme. "I won't ask you to promise me you won't go through the hole," he said, "but I will promise you that if you try, I'm going to haul you out of here." Ilme looked up at him. "This is important." "I didn't say it wasn't," he said. "I said don't climb in the hole full of only God knows what, full of the gods only know what monsters. Also, I implied that you're a liar, and who said she wasn't going to do exactly what she's doing right now." Ilme pulled another book from her satchel. "Would you have kept arguing with me if I told you I wouldn't do it? Well, damn well I liked it. I damn well liked down here." Xanamoran sighed. "Probably. What can I do to make this faster?" Ilme hesitated. Nothing, she wanted to say. This was her problem, her solution. The others had been ordered along by King Radallan under advice from, she suspected, the High Marshal. "Here," she said, handing him her notebook and a charcoal stick. "You don't trust me to look in the hole? You try and sketch what you see. There are multiple passages in there. I want to try and match it to something." Xanamoran set his lamp on the edge of the hole and went to work. While she pored over the text she had by the meager light of her own lamp, she let her mind drift. She could almost pretend the rest of the world didn't exist. There was only this narrow passage deep underground, nothing beyond the reach of her lamp mattering. "If you find it," Xanamoran asked idly, "are you going to suddenly specialize in devastating combat spells?" "Are you trying to convert me?" Ilme asked in the same tone. "Listen, I can't help it if the Red Order has the best combat spells. You all should keep up." Xanamoran crouched back down beside her, holding out the notebook. If you want to do this, I'm your friend, I'll help. But there is no amount of preparing that will make anyone ready for war. Ilme snorted. You start a lot of wars, then? No, he said. I'm just not an idiot. We were children when Radallan conquered the other tribes of Asgarnia. We both saw how difficult that was. He clearly doesn't want another war. He has learned better. Ilme regarded Xanamoran soberly as she took the notebook. I'm worried Valzin is right. I'm worried he won't have a choice. The tunnels match nothing about the reports of the Lost Temple, but the notes the apprentices had gathered for her. Ilme found a reference to haunted passages that led into the Elflands. Visions of human armies wasted by some unseen hand. Ilme shuddered. Well, she'd promised not to go in. But if these were those tunnels, if they abruptly lost the temple, it would have to go. I think the entrance is actually inside the city walls, she muttered. She looked up towards the hole. But these would have to connect, if I'm picturing it right. We could get to the altar through those tunnels. Wonderful, Xanamoran said. Does that mean you'll get off the floor now? Because if your dragon hasn't bitten Master Sticalis by now, then Master Sticalis has fed him so many sweets he'll likely be sick. She let him help her up, and picked up her lamp back up, following him back through the passages, making plans. If Gunnar found out they had death runes, maybe he'd leave them alone. Tomorrow I want to... Xanamoran held up a hand to stop her. A distant, insistent horn echoed in the tunnels again and again. What's that? He whispered. A signal? Ilme said. They rushed through the tunnels to the close earth impending. Ilme's movement. Impeding Ilme's movements. As if it meant to drag her back, the horns echoed again, and her thoughts filled with armies, with the Majorat returned, with longships appearing in the fields between the city and the forest. She broke free into the air, to Xanamoran's scaling of the ladder, to the chaotic roar of hundreds and hundreds of voices. Night had fallen, the purple edge of sunset peeking above the dark and foreboding forest. Only now the silent trees poured forth warriors armed with swords and axes, armored with horned helmets and shields with ferocious demonic faces. Fiery arrows struck the palisade, one shot high over the wall, igniting a thatched roof within the city. Here and there above the wave of warriors, great creatures burst into being, wolves and mammoths and icy behemoths summoned to battle. For a brief, bizarre moment, as she climbed free of the pit, Ilme thought of the ghosts haunting the passages below. The tormented soldiers returned to life. For a moment, it made more sense than what she was seeing. The Fremennik didn't attack inland. Everyone knew that. She had time to prepare. She had time to choose the battlefield. But Gunnar had changed the rules. The gate! Xanamoran shouted and broke into a run. Steel grating clattered down over the open gate. The guards there called back to halt it, shouted at Xanamoran and Ilme to run. Ilme sprinted after them. An arrow zipped past her, slicing a path across her back, and burned with pain and forced a cry from her. Another and another hit the ground before her. She gauged the distance to the approaching Fremennik. At the time she had, Anne saw a contingent of fierce warriors racing straight for the excavation pit. For less than a breath she tried to make sense of it, but all too quickly she thought of the maps and legends and stories meant to tempt her friends away from the life he didn't love. The splintered of a memory, her finger circling what was rapidly becoming Kandarin. Gunnar knew the death altar was here, because Ilme told him. Ilme turned without thinking. Pulling runes from her pouch, they collapsed together into a wave of magic, an arc of earth that swept towards the approaching attackers, knocking them off their feet. She couldn't let them get to the excavation. If they destroyed it, if the death altar might be lost altogether. Those powerful spells cut off when Asgarnia needed them most. But there were so many more Fremennik coming. She heard Xanamoron scream her name. A blaze of flames ignited alongside her. The Fremennik warriors caught in it, howling. Ilme turned, and this time crushed air runes in the fist of her hand, willing wind to sweep across the now burning grates, carrying a wave of fire towards the next set of warriors. Arrows rained around her. Xanamoran thundered up beside her. Come on, come on! They're going after the altar. Let them, you fool! He grabbed her arm, pulling her away. The gate's shut. The city's on fire. We'll have to find another way in. There isn't another way in, she shouted. They retreated. She threw another gust of wind, this one howling gale that skirtled through the whipped-up flames and threw shields and warriors alike aside. There's going to be another way. There is going to be another way in because Azirus is in there. He roared. I don't give a damn about the altar if that means she stays trapped in there. The moment froze around her. The Fremennik would destroy the excavation. She was sure of that. And Azirus was formidable, not to mention Master Stokalis, but Rue. She'd left Rue behind. Maybe Azirus would save him. Maybe Stokalis would carry him out. But if Ilme stayed here, she could not say that she had done everything to protect him. Another rain of arrows sang through the air, and Xanamoran crushed runes into his shield that sizzled as the missiles shattered against it. Keep them back, Ilme said, and follow me. She sprinted away from the excavation pit, away from the approaching Fremennik, towards the corner of the wall behind her. Came the crackle of flames, the boom of lightning. She searched the length of the wall ahead and heard Xanamoran curse. They're in armor. How are they so fast? Here, Ilme shouted, coming to a halt where the wooden wall had been built around an older stone section, and the ground was soft with moisture. Away from the wall, imagining the angles of the spell, Ilme sprinted and then turned. She glanced once at the approaching Fremennik coming around the corner of the city, starlight glistening in their armor. Xanamoran cursed again, clutching his arm where the arrow had scored a cut along his bicep. But instead of pulling runes, he yanked a different pouch from his belt and hissed a deep sibilant word. The air shivered, split, and a great beast of metal stepped free from the summoning portal. The sound of the portal, and its smells, like hair burning in honey cakes, swept another wave of old panic over her. But the steel defender stormed forward, sweeping an arm like a column through the attacking soldiers, heedless of the axes and swords that battered it. Ilme squashed the panic down and plucked another set of runes from her dwindling supply. Her pulse threatened to burst from her chest. She crouched low and cast a wave of earth right against the surface of the ground so that it swept up the crumbling mud and slammed it all against the wall. A slope of earth built halfway up the wall. Another portal opened, another creature, this one a man of fire, that howled like the winds. Ilme had thrown across the field as it joined its steel comrade. Faster, Xanamoran shouted. I don't have another. Ilme threw a second wave of earth up the first, building a slope into a ramp that reached most of the way up the stone part of the wall. Go, she shouted at Xanamoran. Up the wall. You'll have to pull me up behind. Are you insane? Go or I'll push you with another air spell. By the empty helmet, she heard him spit as he bolted towards the wall. He leapt to catch the archway at the edge. He pulled himself up, turned and beckoned Ilme. Before his attention jerked to the fight, the steel creature suddenly let out a keening cry and dissolved into magic. The Fremennik broke past the fiery summon, and Ilme raced for the wall. She jumped, arrows zipping through the air, and Xanamoran caught her wrist, hauled her up, and immediately swept another shield around them. Her torn back screamed, and fresh blood rolled over her skin. Ilme leaned over the edge of the stone wall section and cast the biggest air spell she could directly into the makeshift ramp. Dirt sprayed everywhere, carried out on the tornado of her spell, and she flinched back, pelted by a burst of it. A rock caught her cheek, gouging it deeply, but the ramp was gone. She dropped back behind the edge of the wall. Above her, Xanamoran swore, Azirus, you lunatic. Puzzled, Ilme followed her gaze. The palace rose above the clustered buildings of Ardoin. At the peak of its roof she saw a mote of bright blue light gleam. And then a stream of magic, bright with the powers of the water altar, streaked down to smash into the roof below, smothering the fire but sending timber flying. Undeniably Aziris. A second moat gleamed red, the torrents of flames erupting towards the army beyond. A second wizard perched on the roof. Ilme hoped it was Master Jana, and banishing the image of the frail Master Sir Callus balanced on a thatched roof, she peered and peered at the flashing motes, but there was no way to see if a small purple dragon was up there too. One after another, she and Xanamoron scrambled down the wall. Ilme had no idea where she was. They were somewhere on the southern side of the city, on the western end. And between them, the palace there was fire and screaming and night. "How many runes do you have?" Ilme asked. "I'm down to a handful." "Only a dozen or so," Xanamoron said. "I burned through a lot." An explosion rang. Excuse me. An explosion rang above the din, echoing through the warm air, and Ilme and Xanamoron jumped against the wall. A second smaller boom shook the sky. "I thought they didn't have runes," he hissed. "They don't," Ilme said, trying to piece together what would do that. "What Gunnar would have. You have no idea. You have no way to find out. We have to go. Woo!" "Right. Stay along the wall if they've breached." "When?" Ilme said grimly. "It'll be the other side of the city," he nodded to her. "Stay close." The fire inside the city spread quickly, rooftop to rooftop, and twice they took a turn only to find a hasty assemblage barrier across the road, blocking their way. Ilme's lungs screamed, and the smoke and the endless race across the city, sending sharp needles of pain between her ribs. Citizens burst out of the darkness, some running ahead of her carrying their belongings, some picking up arms and running towards the wall. More explosions. The breach of the wall came with a roar of triumph that swept over the city like a roll of thunder. Ilme checked the runes in her pouch again. Not prepared, not nearly prepared enough. Soldiers kept trying to force them south with the other refugees as the sounds of battle grew louder, nearer. They evaded the first few, aiming back towards the palace, back towards their friends. The smoke grew thicker, Ilme's eyes and nose streaming with it, ash tracking black lines down Xanamoron's face. At one point they found themselves trapped in a narrow alley facing approaching Fremennik, and Xanamoron spent the last of his fire runes filling the gap with a towering cyclone of flames, which caught the roofs on either side. "It's already on fire," he shouted as they retreated. As was the palace, smoke obscured the gleaming star of Serodonin, and the roof where Aziris had stood casting blasts of water below was lost in flames. There was no sign of Rue or Aziris or the others. The trickle of refugees became a frantic flood. Ilme could hear the soldiers shouting orders now, the roar of the Fremennik, the white knights organized around the refugees trying to get them out of the southern gate. "We're at Superior," Ilme shouted. "Went back for the mad wizard on the roof," a white knight shouted back. "The palace is on fire. You need to go." "Are they still inside?" Ilme cried. "You need to go." "You can go rot beyond the edicts," Xanamoron snarled. He dodged around the knight, tearing off towards the burning building. The white knight put his hand up to stop Ilme, but she was quick on Xanamoron's heels. Into the smoke, into the darkness, Ilme strained to keep her eyes on Xanamoron's red robes ahead of her. One hand holding her sleeve to her face, she clicked runes together in her palm, finding a pair of air runes to clear the smoke from in front of them. Ilme felt as if she were sliding out of her own body and spirit coming untethered. A spirit becoming untethered. A surge of magic rippled through the air. Above them and to the left, she grabbed Xanamoron's robes and poured him towards it. The palace was a maze, dark as the underground passage, as full of death. In the darkness she heard the beams groan, the far-off collapse of the ceiling. Water suddenly soaked her shoes. She heard coughing, heard voices. Xanamoran shoved past her, and ahead she saw the glow of a light orb she recognized as Master Stikalis's, and green robes around a body crouched low on the floor. "Aziris!" Xanamoran shouted. Aziris looked up. Fearful, frantic, she was soaked through, as was the wood around her, a haystack of splintered beams and boards, a spill of cracked stone. The ceiling had come down here, parts of it of a stairwell. Aziris blinked at them, dazed and coughing. "I can't get them out," she said weakly. Elmi searched the jumble of broken buildings for signs of Rue and the others. Anne saw Superior pinned down by a huge beam, gray with pain and shock. There was no sign of Sturcalis or Rue. Xanamoran went to her, tearing a part of his robes to make a mask. Ilme dropped to her knees beside Superior. His arms disappeared under the beam, one leg pinned. Xanamoran summoned another. "I don't have more pouches." He dropped beside her and cursed. "Gotta come off," Superior managed through the clenched teeth. Crushed, and the building was filling up with smoke, the fire creeping closer. Ilme took off her belt and shoving the nearly spent rune pouch into her pocket. She wrapped Superior's arm just above the elbow, tighter, and eyeing the heavy length of beam. She swung back to Xanamoran. "Find some sort of lever. 3 of them." "I tried that," Aziris said. "It didn't budge." "There's 3 of us now," Ilme said, tossing aside rubble until she found a length of iron. Some piece of the ceiling. Her lungs burned, her back screamed, but she fitted it under the beam near Superior's shoulder. Wedged a rock under it. Xanamoran fitted a smaller joist beside it. Aziris grabbed Superior's sword from the floor where it had fallen. On the count of 3, they all heaved. "It's absurd! We don't have a spell for this," Xanamoran grunted. Superior pushed with his good arm, wriggling out from under the beam. His arm was a bloody broken mess, and Xanamoran helped him up, and Aziris ripped off part of her skirt to wrap his arm, but they weren't finished. "Aziris, get him out," Ilme said, scrambling up the rubble that had shifted with Superior's escaped. "Rue! Sturcalis!" She heard another room collapse behind her. "Rue!" "Here," the Red ordered Master's voice came distant and reedy. Ilme threw aside stone and splintering wood, trying to find the source. Sturcalis's bony fingers reached through, a foot from where she had been digging. "Ilme?" She tore her fingernails, pulling aside more plaster and splintery rubble, opening the space. Another raft had come down, buried in the rest of the ceiling. Master Sturcalis peered out from under it, panting, blood streaming from his nostrils, a black and purple bruise darkening on his face along one side. He smiled crookedly at her. "We were afraid," he gasped. "You might have been caught. Is Xanamoran?" "Here?" Xanamoran said, leaning close to the hole. "Master, are you hurt?" "I'm dying," the old man said with a rough laugh. "Each to extent of his abilities for the price of his sacrifices." He flinched, shifting slightly, and brought Rue out, curled tightly and shivering. He pushed the little dragon through the rubble. "Take him. Go." Ilme bundled Rue into her chest and burrowed into her, shaking and unspeaking. It's all right," she crooned, feeling his fluttering little pulse against her. Xanamoran yanked on the beam that blocked the passage. "I'll make a shield. Push it out. Make some space." He looked back. "Ilme, tell me you have soul runes." She shook her head, hating the answer, hating that she wasn't ready. "None." Sturcalis reached through and grabbed Xanamoran's wrist in one shaking hand. "You'll go, boy. I did my utmost, and here I end." Another explosion, another crash of collapse. The smoke was pouring in thicker. "No," Xanamoran said. "Ilme, get a lever." But the beam was buried. They'd be lifting half the building to budge it. "Guide the order," Sturcalis broke off, coughing. "Can't punish those Fremennik if you both die." He's right, Xanamoran. We have to go." She yanked on his arm, but he fought her. "What are you going to make me tell Aziris?" That stopped him. "Clever girl," Sturcalis panted. Xanamoran hesitated, tears brimming, in his smoke-reddened eyes. "Goodbye, Master Sturcalis," he managed. "Thank you for everything." Dracala smiled weakly. May this change drive you. They fled back the way they came, through the ruined palace, into the stable yard, and out through the gates into the night, not looking back at the city in flames. The Fremennik warriors and their summoned fighters rampaging through the streets. They fled into the forest with Aziris and Purier, the white knights who had made it out back to Falador with the news no one wanted to hear. She had assumed, they all had, that Gunnar would merely be a copy of his father, a Jarl who blustered and threatened and made trouble if they tried to enter the Fremennik lands. Ilme should have known. She should have realized. He'd listened to all the time she talked about the rune altars. Even if it took another decade, Gunnar would keep his promise. But in the forests, in the sight of the burning city, wounded and grieving, Ilme realized she had forgotten one very important thing. She might not be ready, her friends might not be ready, but they were none of them alone. And that is chapter 13. We're a little more than halfway through the book. But that's where I'm going to leave this this live reading today. I hope you all enjoyed it. There is going to be a playlist with all my previous readings. And thank you for stopping by. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.